So, there was a game revealed for the Nintendo Switch during their E3 presentation that, for some strange reason, I haven't been able to get out of my head. And that game is The Witcher 3, which we all know was a very big deal. It was a huge piece of news that this huge game, The Witcher 3, very popular, known for being very beautiful looking, also having a freaking massive world to play in. Big deal that this game was actually confirmed for the Switch. And we know that there were rumors and stuff in that week leading up to their E3 Direct that kind of said, hey, it looks like The Witcher 3 is coming to Switch. But what was really unique about that situation is how that was one that so many people didn't believe. They didn't like the rumor. They didn't want to believe it because they just felt that there was no way this game could or would ever come to the Switch. Now, it's kind of extra funny that that game has been so stuck in my head since E3 because I tried The Witcher 3 when it first launched. I picked it up, and at the time that that game came out, I was very excited for it, but man, it just didn't jive with me. And I think it was just less about the game and more about just what I was looking for at that time, I think. And I'd only been doing YouTube for about 2 or 3 years at the time, and I made a video about how I wasn't really liking the game, and it was like, very famously one of my most disliked videos, because when the game was brand new, everyone had a love affair with that game, so I was this one wacko on the internet with like 2,000 subscribers who said that they didn't like the game. But the reason that the game has been stuck in my head isn't so much about my massive excitement for the game, although I definitely am excited to try it again, and I will try it again on the Switch. It's because I feel like The Witcher 3 just kind of represents something that I feel that we've been seeing happen with the Switch for a while now. And even though 2018 was a slow year for the Switch, at least I think it is. Some people maybe think that it wasn't, but I found it to be a pretty slow year. But even though that's the case, I feel like here in only the third year of the Switch's life, I feel like we're really seeing this system hit its stride. And I don't know, I guess I feel like it's really just kind of just getting going or just warming up. And that there are a lot of pretty cool surprises and things ahead of us for the Nintendo Switch. Obviously, when we think about the Nintendo Switch just getting going, just getting started, just warming up, we think about a couple of things. We think about how long the system has already been on the market, which, like I said, 2.5 years at this point, 2.5, 3 years. That's a good amount of time, really, to be on the market. And it shows with the amount of games that are already available for it. So, yeah, you get a bunch of time on the market. And then we also think about how long the Switch will be around. Something I've talked about with you guys quite a few times is the life of the Switch. And for a while, people wanted to think that the Switch was going to be around forever. And to be fair, Tatsumi Kimishima, when he was still in charge, I think he even said that they had a 10-year plan for the Nintendo Switch. So that's not, those opinions aren't based out of completely nothing. I, however, feel like, and you've heard me say this, I think the Switch would probably last about half that long. I'm thinking maybe about 5, probably 6 years, so I'm guessing about 2022 might be when the successor console launches, the Switch becomes their previous console, their last-gen console, whatever we want to call it at that time. Not even focusing on the concept of a Switch Pro, which maybe a Switch Pro happens next year, maybe it doesn't, who knows. But whether a Switch Pro comes out or not, I think the Nintendo Switch, as we know this device and this basic hardware, will move on to the next thing around 2022. And so, if I was to tell you here at the halfway point, because that would make 2019 about the halfway point, how could it just be warming up if we're at the halfway point? And to me, I think that's part of why I believe we're at the warming up phase, is because we're starting to see some really great titles come to the Switch. There is a lot of evidence that the industry has gotten on board with the Switch, and this did start even earlier on, to be fair, but I think 2019 is really kind of the next level of showing us that the industry is on board, and a game like The Witcher 3 kind of shows that. I guess to me, The Witcher 3 sort of represents this whole idea, not just because, ooh, it's a really pretty looking game and it's a huge world, so it's impressive to get it to work on the Nintendo Switch. That's all 100% true, don't get me wrong. I'm not taking away from that. I just think the other reason why The Witcher seems to represent that for me, or kind of kick this off in my head, is kind of just the decision to do it, you guys. It's the decision to bring a game like The Witcher to the Switch. Forget the tech part. It's just what that game represents. The fact that it was one of these big, mature showcases for PlayStation and Xbox and PC hardware. And traditionally, with some exceptions, there have been exceptions, but traditionally, by and large, the video game market has never looked at Nintendo that way. We've never seen them consider that kind of game experience to also come to the Nintendo console of that era. That's not usually what we see. We'll see some third-party choices and some third-party multiplats come here and there, but they're usually not those kind of games. Yes, we've had some Watch Dogs and some Assassin's Creeds and stuff come over the years, obviously Ubisoft being a big proponent of that, but they eventually said, we're not doing that anymore. Very famously, Ubisoft said after Watch Dogs, no more mature games on the Wii, the Wii U at that time. We're not doing it. No more mature games on Nintendo. And that was like pretty frustrating to hear at the time because we all wanted to believe that companies would continue to do that. And even so, the couple of games they did put on the Wii U, again, those were rare circumstances. You just don't see those kinds of games typically come to Nintendo consoles, you know? A lot of the third-party multiplats on the Wii and the Wii U were definitely not a game like what The Witcher is. But we're seeing stuff like this happen, man, and there's been other cases of this as well. We've seen Doom games come. We've got Mortal Kombat 11. We're getting, you know, Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 being exclusive is a huge deal. Obviously, you know, as a multi-platform game, that wouldn't necessarily fit into this category, but I do think it's great to see a game like that coming as well. We've seen several Resident Evil games, actually quite a few Resident Evil games now that all of them have been announced for the Nintendo Switch, except for like Resident Evil 7, for example. You know, and we've seen LA Noire. It's just really been cool, and so we're seeing companies jump on board, and we're seeing game franchises jump on board in a way that we haven't seen it before, you know. Of course, Bethesda, huge proponent. Oh my god, we have freaking Wolfenstein of all things. The super mature, super bloody Nazi killing game Wolfenstein, and the next Wolfenstein game upcoming, Youngblood, is also going to be releasing on the Nintendo Switch. These are huge wins. These are huge things that we're seeing. And, you know, obviously the quality output of these third-party companies bringing a lot of their games over. And I'm not even delving yet into the first-party content, which is also ramping up. But when we just see the whole industry, whether it's Nintendo with their first-party stuff, the third-party companies and the third-party industry with all of their titles coming over, some of them in exclusive fashion, Astral Chain, Bayonetta, Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3, Octopath Traveler. I will forever and a day call that game Project Octopath, you guys. I cannot get it out of my brain that game was Project Octopath but became Octopath Traveler. I don't know what it is. My brain is just wired in this dumb way. Anyway, that stuff aside. What I'm getting at is we're just seeing the first party and third party stuff really ramp up and really get behind. Like I said, the output has just gotten better and better over the course of the first 2 years of the console's life. And honestly, you know, E3 showed us something, and I talked about it on my live stream during E3. And what it showed us, I think, is that the whole industry, with the exception of Nintendo, is in transition. I think everyone in the gaming industry, Sony, Microsoft, obviously, as well as all of the third-party companies, which has always been my justification for why Nintendo does consider everyone competition, and they don't ignore Sony and Microsoft, is because the third-party companies also move ahead as the generations move. And when you have two of the three players moving, Sony and Microsoft, moving to next-gen hardware that's going to be next-gen tech that dwarfs what the Switch is possible, what the Switch makes possible, you get the companies like Ubisoft and EA and Bethesda and Activision and all these guys moving onto that hardware and moving onto those games. And so at E3, we saw really poor output from a lot of companies, and we also saw very few games with gameplay, because it seems like, my theory here is, everyone's just moving on to next-gen tech. They're making games for PS5 and Xbox Scarlet, you know, on the next level of PCs, stuff that probably couldn't run on the Nintendo Switch, I'm sure, and they're focused on that, and that stuff isn't ready to be revealed. And so the industry is like in a lull period right now, which we've seen happen before. But Nintendo isn't. Nintendo is not in transition because, you know, like I said, per my theory, we're still about 3 years away from the next hardware, you know, the Switch being replaced. We're at the halfway point for the Switch's life, which means the Switch is just getting going. Like I've said already, like they're just warming up with this console. And so 2017 started the console with an incredible year, like the best launch year ever. You get your Zelda, you get your Mario, you get your Splatoon, you get your Xenoblade, you get your Fire Emblem Warriors, you get, I don't know, 100 other things. It was a great year. It was incredible. 2018 definitely slowed down quite a bit, but did have a couple of really big hits, of course. you know, not to mention ending the year with Smash Brothers of all things. And it had Octopath Traveler also released. Mario Tennis, which is a game I did not like, but I do know was a fairly decent hit. You know, Super Mario Party. There definitely were some games coming out in that year as well. But now with 2019, we're really seeing stuff pick up. On the first party front, Nintendo's knocking it out of the park. You got Fire Emblem, you got Luigi's Mansion, you get Animal Crossing did unfortunately get delayed. We're getting Astral Chain, we're getting, what's the other one? I don't know, so many games. And then, of course, many of the third-party titles, I've already said. Doom, Mortal Kombat 11, Astral Chain, it's just crazy. It's just such an insane year. Marvel Ultimate Alliance, of course. And so, yeah, I think I just wanted to make this video to share the trend that I've been seeing. Maybe a lot of you guys have already thought about it, but I kind of wanted to put it into thoughts and words into a video because I'm pretty happy with it. You know, I'm pretty excited about it. You know, seeing a game like The Witcher and Mortal Kombat, I sometimes can't even believe I can play Mortal Kombat on my Switch, you guys. Mortal Kombat, what has it been, like 11 years or whatever people said? I don't remember when the last Mortal Kombat game was. It was something on the GameCube, I'm sure. Or maybe probably something on the Wii. But still, even that was like over 10 years ago, right? So it's just really cool to see all this stuff happening with the Switch, man. And, you know, you just can't count Nintendo out. It's really interesting. As much as it's kind of weird and a shame that Nintendo right now, because of the Switch, isn't kind of, you know, in line and moving in tandem with Sony and Microsoft, like into this generation and now into the next one coming up. You know, it's a shame that a PS5 and an Xbox Scarlet is probably going to launch around next year, and they're probably going to beat Nintendo to the punch by, you know, a year or two. I think that is definitely a bummer. And I've said it before, a Switch Pro ain't going to prove to be stiff competition to a PS5 and an Xbox Scarlet. It's not. That is going to get a couple of extra legs out of the Switch hardware, but it is not going to compete with those. Nintendo needs to move on to something better, which I think that they will be doing, you know. And so it's a shame that Sony and Microsoft are beating them to the punch by a little bit. But I think it's cool at the same time because it's everything I'm talking about now. We're seeing the Switch just warm up as Sony and Microsoft are going to have to start from the starting line again once the PS5 and Scarlet come out. I mean, don't get me wrong. Those are probably going to be great consoles, and I'm sure they're going to be huge hits, and it's going to restart the cycle of their sales. Like, their sales are going to get a kickstart bump once those consoles launch. But I do think that the Switch is still going to continue because as those guys have to just get going and get over the first year hurdle of brand new hardware with not a lot of games, the Switch, which is already a massive hit and a massive seller, is just going to keep on rolling and is getting all these games and all of the Marvels and the Dooms and the Mortal Kombats and the Octopaths and games like these, the Astral Chains. They're just going to keep churning out for the next 2 or 3 years because the Switch is just hitting its stride. And so it's going to help them kind of match the incoming onslaught of new hardware from Sony and Microsoft, at least to a degree. So I think that the next 2 years, 2020 and 2021, are going to be very interesting to see play out as Sony and Microsoft introduce that hardware and the Switch in its kind of, you know, at the height of its popularity and the height of its game output, to see how everything's going to kind of match up and play out. And I think, you know, as gamers, we're just going to have a lot of awesome stuff to play, a lot of awesome stuff to kind of see play out, and a lot of great, you know, content for like YouTubers like myself to talk about. So I'm actually really excited for that part as well. So either way, these are just some really random thoughts. I feel like this video is kind of all over the place, but I just had a lot to say. I thought this was an interesting concept, and I love seeing a successful, popular Nintendo, you know? We've gone through, as Nintendo fans, many periods where Nintendo hasn't been that way. They've ebbed and flowed a lot over the years, and it's definitely a shame, because I've been a lifelong fan since the NES myself. But hey, right now, let's just soak in the good, man. Nintendo's killing it. And they're going to keep rolling strong as the other guys start from zero once their new consoles come out. And so with that, I don't know. What do you guys think, man? What does this idea mean to you? What do you get out of this when I talk about the Switch just warming up, just getting started? You know, do you think that makes sense? Or maybe you disagree and you feel like that happened, you know, on the launch year? You know, maybe this is just something that didn't really make sense to you. But I don't know. I had fun talking about it, which is what I like to do here on Ro2R Review. And with that, this video's a wrap. So thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Ro2R Review, and I'll catch you next time on another video.